Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's City Council study session. Tonight we're going to be talking about, I believe, our ambulance service. And Larry, did you want to start this out, or we're just going to go right to the chief? All right.
Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year.
Good evening. Yeah, same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to talk to you about our deployment plan. That first slide's not real informative, but it does have a picture of our ambulance, what they're going to look like with the Star of Life on there, so you can clearly see that the ambulances are ambulances. Tonight, I'm just going to talk to you guys about, give you an overview of our progress to, regarding deploying the actual ambulances here in the city. We're going to talk a little bit about terminology, definitions. I know probably, I'm going to say half of you were on the council when we did the first feasibility study, and I think the other half probably weren't. So some of these definitions are going to be new to you, and I just want to kind of make sure you guys understand all this stuff really clearly, and feel free to ask. You don't have to wait till the end. If you guys have a question or whatever, just pop it out and we'll get it going so you guys can go over all this. We're going to talk about staffing, demand projections, response times, some budgeting stuff, and basically our projections. So when you talk about terminology, I know you guys have all heard the terminology before. Certificate of necessity was what, when you guys first got the feasibility study, was in 2018. So it's been years. And again, I know some of you guys voted on some of these things, various aspects of this, a number of times over the years before we finally got awarded this in 2023. The certificate of necessity was a process that was put in place a long time ago to make sure rural areas of Arizona would be covered by ambulances. And it was kind of archaic, and it's changed a lot over the years, and it's changed a lot over the last few years because of complaints from fire departments and different folks. Like right before we started ours, you could have a CON hearing that would last for 2 months. And cities were saying that's ridiculous. That costs we can't pay for an attorney for 2 months worth of trial. So the state legislator went ahead and put some limitations on that and said, listen, you got 10 days to hear these cases. And that helped us. It actually made us save money because we didn't have to go to court. Typically they draw these things, the opposing sides or the intervener draws these out. Ours went to the final 10th day in that afternoon. So, I mean, literally it was drawn out through the entire process. But PSAP is a public safety answering point. Low acuity unit, you guys also heard the term low acuity unit. We put a low acuity unit in service in 2020. March 17th of 2020, we put that in service. Due to the stuff that was going on with COVID. Rather than exposing all 4 firefighters at a house to a COVID patient, we would send the low acuity unit. One would go up and approach the patient and deal with the patient. The other would stand back and do the documentation and stuff. That way we didn't have to put an engine out of service with 4 guys on it that had all been exposed to COVID. And it worked out well. And there's still some funding I guess disputes or I don't know if arguments is the right word. There's still some discrepancies that are going on with the funding mechanism on that, where we're having to explain why we did that and how we did it. Rescue units are a unit that is capable of transporting, and it's ALS or advanced life support criteria. It's our most serious patients, our patients with chest pain, strokes, amputations, very serious traumatic type injuries. And those rescue units have an firefighter EMT and a firefighter paramedic on board. Basic life support is our EMTs. All of our firefighters, everybody that works for the fire department's an EMT. And that's basic life support. In other words, somebody breaks their ankle or breaks a toe or various different things qualify as BLS or basic life support. And a basic life support, we put them in an ambulance and transport them to the hospital. And typically on BLS transports, they're driving to the hospital with no lights or sirens. It's not a major emergency. It's something they need to go get looked at, but it's not a major emergency. Another term, service area, that's the boundaries of our incorporated area. Our service area, where we were given the CON, is the city limits for the city of Casa Grande. It also includes anything that we incorporate later. If we incorporate something, that's automatically included in our CON. There was some discussion during the hearing about places like Colonial del Sol and Indian Hills about responses up there. They didn't take any action on that, but our position was if somebody in one of those county islands or an area right next to the city needs assistance, we will always assist them. And we do the same thing on fire calls. If somebody, has a house fire or something just out of the city or slightly out of the city, regional gets on scene and calls for assistance, we always send a fire engine to assist them, just because we don't want them to be out there by themselves and working on somebody by themselves or at a house fire by themselves. So we always send somebody on those. Access settlement, you guys I'm sure have heard of the various different things like access and Medicare. There's different billing that takes place with the different types of medical plans. And that's one of the things we've been doing over the last 6 months, is getting all these different aspects in the paperwork. There's a lot of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed that we've had to do over this last 6 to 8 months. And some of it we couldn't do until we were actually issued the CON. Basically,
Hey, Chief?
yes, sir.
So you were defining some of these terms. I know what an EMT is, but what is an EMCT?
EMCT? That's the same thing. It's just a similar term for it.
Emergency
Certified.
medical,
I think
certified?
certified is what it is.
Oh,
I think
okay.
C stands for certified.
Certified technician?
But yeah, EMCT is an EMT.
Okay.
EMCT paramedic is a certified paramedic.
Okay, thank you.
And you'll hear different terms. Sometimes you'll hear paramedics called CEPs, certified emergency paramedics. There's different terms for it. But, I mean, the bottom line is they're either.
But you guys have more acronyms than, not quite as many as the transportation department, but almost.
Yeah, and not like the military, but yeah, I mean, typically, ours are either an EMT or they're a paramedic, one of the two.
Okay, thank you.
We've essentially, like I said, we've been working on all this stuff over the last 6 to 8 months. We're authorized billing for Medicare, we're authorized billing through Access, we're authorized to bill through the regular private insurance companies, we're authorized to bill through workers' comp. We're still in the process of receiving authorization to bill through the, I don't think it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, but it's the insurance company that covers folks on the reservation. So we're still in that process, but we've actually already had a transport. Somebody wanted to be transported out there, which we did transport them out there. I think we've talked about this before, and you guys voted on this before. We use Image Trend for our EPCRs, our electronic patient care reporting. And we looked around and did a lot of talking with other departments to talk to them about the best business practices for billing. And most of them, if not all of them, were using Image Trend, the same company that does the EPCR, to do the billing. And after going through all the different stuff on that, that was who we also decided to go with Image Trend. And we've been pretty happy with them. They basically got all of our stuff set up. We had to also work very closely with Brenda's folks in finance, Kay and Ellen and Jamie Barr and them. We've had to work very closely with them to make sure. I wanted to make sure that we kind of had a seamless process, that finance was included in all this from the beginning so there wouldn't be any issues later. and I wanted to make sure that they were very clear on how we were going to do it, and that we were doing it the way they wanted us to do it. So we brought them in very early, the very first meeting we brought them in to talk about our billing practices, how we were going to bill, and to make sure that we were doing it that fit into the Casa Grande Finance Department's business practices. Image Trend is going to charge us $25 per recovered bill. So if they don't pay, we don't pay. If the insurance company or the Medicare or Access does pay, we pay them $25 per recovered bill. One item of note that has been brought up, and we've talked about it, and it just couldn't be avoided, is, and I think some of you have heard about this issue before, we have to set up what's called a drop box, and it's essentially a P.O. box that payments for bills are sent to, and the city uses Wells Fargo as the bank. Well, the drop box does have a Los Angeles address on it. That can't be avoided. We've talked to them, and we've talked to them a lot, and there's no way to avoid that. That is where all their P.O. boxes go, to Los Angeles, and it is different. The P.O. box is different than the sewage and billing for the city, sewage and sanitation, but it is a P.O. box through, it says City Casa Grande Ambulance Billing, but it is a P.O. box in Los Angeles, so. And again, couldn't be avoided. We are anticipating using the J. Vincent Group as our independent auditing. We do have to do some separate reports to the state, to DHS, for our ambulance, just the ambulance service, independent of the audits and stuff that finance does. And we're gonna use J. Vincent Group to do those audits. They do probably 3/4 of the districts and departments in Arizona. They're very good. They were also the consultant that we used during the CON hearing to assist us with that process. We've established backup agreements, and you guys have actually seen a couple of these and approved them here at council. We currently have our backup agreement with Eloy. We still are in progress of dealing with Gila River, Maricopa Ambulance Company, and we've met a couple of times with AMR also, because we're in discussions with them about how, kind of what this is all going to look like as we progress through and get done with it. And I would say that our talks with them have been amicable, and we've got along well, and had good discussions about how things are going to move forward. And I think it's going to end up to be just fine. We are making some changes to our CAD system. That's not a big deal. Laura and her people are working on that. We had to make some changes to help out with dispatching. You guys also voted and added on an additional module to the dispatch system this year for EMS dispatching. So we're adding some of that and incorporating some of this new rescue stuff into that. One of the things that's been a little bit of a challenge is inventory and stuff like that. We are having to go through inventory and look at our orders for medication and bandages and IVs and C-call, all the things that we use typically, gloves, all the stuff we use on a daily basis is going to increase. And we've had some increased costs of medications. I don't think it's a secret. You guys have all heard, and we've talked about this a number of times. Medications and drugs are costing a lot more than they used to. And we're also working through some of the restocking, but we get restocked through the hospital, through the pharmacy at the hospital, and then we also have a contract with a company that restocks us as well. Some of the other things, operational policies, we've had to, again, you say, okay, we're going to start an ambulance thing. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that take place, and we've had to establish various different policies on, patient belonging, how people are going to report stuff, how people are going to go through, like, we had to establish a hardship policy for people that say, I just can't afford to pay. Well, we're not experts on that, so we had to talk to Brenda's folks about that, because they already have policies in place for people that come to finance and can't afford their bills or can't afford to pay. And then you guys know, because you guys have authorized and helped us out with additional personnel. And they've been in the academy. You guys swore in 7 of them at the last meeting here. I just wanted to kind of talk about expectations on the feasibility study. Again, that feasibility study at this point is 6 years old. For the half of you that were probably here when that took place, I would say most of it, if not all that stuff that was in that feasibility study is out the window at this point. We're talking about 6 years down the road. We are also talking about a COVID pandemic that hit the United States that changed the dynamics on everything we do regarding EMS and prices. And probably the biggest thing that's negatively affected us, and this is not just us, but Kevin's going through this as well, is procurement of vehicles, ambulances and fire engines. We used to be able to order a fire engine and get it a year later. I think the mayor actually went back and picked up one of our fire engines when it was ordered, and we went back and picked it up a year later. Well, now, you order a fire engine, you don't get it for 3 years. And that's causing a lot of strain and problems with the whole industry. That's the same issue with ambulances. We used to be able to get an ambulance and get it 6 or 8 months later. Now you order an ambulance and you don't get it for 2 years or 3 years. So that's been very challenging, working through those issues, trying to make sure we're, and I know you guys are aware of this. We've talked to you about this during some of the procurement stuff. I just wanted to kind of make you aware of it. I guess what I'm trying to say is on the feasibility study, as it being 6 years old, I think you can count on mostly anything that was in that feasibility study as being out the window at this point, since it's 6 years down the road. I think that if you look at the feasibility study and you look at some of the information that was in there, the population was 48,000 that we used on that one. We were transporting about 4,700 people, and a trip, an ALS trip, was $1,400 at that time. And remember, on our trips, we don't decide what our trip fee or cost is. DHS decides that and tells us what it is. And if you look at those numbers now, we're almost, 17,000 higher on population. We're at 5,800 transports now a year. The ALS fees an additional $200. So all these numbers have kind of changed in regards to that study. Staffing and deployment. Our staffing and deployment's not really changing at all. Our staffing is 4 people on an engine company and 2 people on a rescue or transport unit. This says we have 78 people, and that might be what we have right now, but when all is said and done, operations for the fire department, or basically firefighters, there'll be about 90 firefighters when all is said and done. When all the firefighters are in place, all the ambulance folks or the firefighters that are going to be working on the transport units are in place, battalion chief on each shift, and then Chief LaFalce and myself, there'll be about 90 people. And dispatch still has 18, I think, correct? Well, they're authorized 18. And then we also have 6 people that work in administration and headquarters and fire prevention. I would like to introduce you guys to that young lady that's sitting next to Laura Martinez back there. That is Shannon Cole. She is our new administrative assistant that's going to be in charge of ambulance billing. So today was her first day, and her very first day she gets to come to a council meeting, so lucky her.
Welcome to the fire. Pardon the pun.
Couple things on this. There's not a whole lot of information that you guys don't already know. I think you guys already know our fire engines have 4 people on them. Our fire engines, we try to maintain a recommended minimum level of 2 paramedics on all of our fire engines. Sometimes that can be a little problematic. If the captain and the engineer are paramedics, that's a problem. We need somebody in the back seat to be a paramedic rather than the paramedics in the front seat, because it does provide some limitations when we have to follow up and go to the hospital. Now the guy that drives the fire engine has to get in the ambulance to go to the hospital. while all of our firefighters can drive the fire engines, not all of them are proficient at pumping them yet. And if the captain has to get in back, now we may have a younger or newer firefighter basically acting captain or following up to the hospital, which is not a big deal if they're just following up. But if another emergency comes in or another call comes in, it's a little problematic. So, like I said, we do want to have, typically recommend have a minimum of 2 paramedics on every fire engine. And we do have that right now, but we're still sending people to paramedic school because it's a little bit of a struggle to keep that up. The CON's very similar to the CON that had been issued before. You got 10 minutes and 0 seconds to arrive at 90% of your calls in 10 minutes or less. And we're right now at about 7 minutes and 11 seconds on 90% of our incidents. So we're well within our standard. And when we open up new station 503, that time should go down as well. For EMS, the administration, the EMS division of the department now, which is all the ambulances, the transport people, we have an EMS division chief. That's essentially a person that's in a battalion chief's position, but they're working daylights. In other words, they work 4-10s. They don't stay at the station overnight. They don't spend the night at the fire station, but they work at headquarters administratively, full-time on EMS stuff. We have Scott Benzing, who's been acting in that role for the past year. He's done a fantastic job. Scott has decided that he wants to go back to the fire station, and we're trying to accommodate him if we can. We have interviews set up on December 9th. We're interviewing 4 people that we believe are pretty qualified to take over that spot. That's next Tuesday.
January 9th?
January,
I'm sorry, what did I say?
December.
Yeah, sorry. Just, it's January 9th.
Okay.
Next Tuesday, a week from today, I think. Next Tuesday, I'm having trouble with this whole 2024 thing already. What else? Let's see
Chief,
here.
can I ask, are those internal candidates only, or,
None of them are internal.
okay,
That one's from Eloy, one's from Gilbert, one's from Queen Creek, and one is from Maricopa. All 4 of them are from fire departments. And 3 of them are currently battalion chiefs at those departments, and one of them's a captain. And all 4 of them have experience in EMS, so. And they're also, all 4 of them are also paramedics. So.
Chief, and explain to me the difference between a paramedic and an EMT.
It's in the presentation.
It's essentially the amount of hours of training you go through.
Okay.
I think an EMT's around 120 hours, and I think a paramedic's over 400 hours. Do you remember?
Paramedics can give IVs.
None of the people here have been through recently. It's been a long time, but I want to say EMT's like 110 hours or 120 hours, and I think paramedics.
Is it more intense medical training too?
Oh, much more.
Okay.
EMT paramedics, EMTs do basic life support. They can administer oxygen and some other stuff. Paramedics start IVs, they administer drugs, and monitor, do a lot of other things that EMTs can't do.
Okay.
EMTs are able to assist as long as they're supervised by a paramedic, do a lot of things as well, but the paramedic's the highest medical authority on scene at the call.
And Chief, at the beginning, you had mentioned about the MT, the basics, that all the firefighters, they all
All
are
our
that.
EMTs.
All EMTs, right?
All of our firefighters are EMTs.
Right.
And all of our firefighters are capable of driving and transporting our ambulances. Yes, sir.
Do you anticipate sometime in the future, as this program grows, which I suspect it will, to hire just EMTs that aren't firefighters?
I do. I think
Just to run our
that will probably happen. I had a discussion with the city manager about that the other day.
I mean, to me, it kind of makes sense if we're going into that direction.
Ambulance.
And then my other question would be, like you're talking about, and maybe you'll get to it, if you are, let me know, but about the low acuity, are we taking that out?
I am gonna cover that.
Okay.
I know, and
I thought when I read through it, but.
I know that's a concern of yours. It's a concern of mine, and it's a concern of the city manager as well, but I think that on the other question that you asked, there's pros and cons on that. You know, where I came from previously, we did that. We hired civilian EMTs, and they weren't in the they weren't in the retirement system, but it did give you a good opportunity to look at those employees and see if they would be a good fit for your
And,
organization.
yeah, that's a great idea.
So it was good for younger members. The problem was they also get poached a lot, so you end up getting them trained, and 2 months later, they're going to Peoria or Queen Creek
But-
or wherever they're going. So it's a nonstop training process with these guys.
And in my mind, the private companies running the ambulance now, AMR, they would be mostly EMTs, right? Not firefighters, or, I don't know. Do you know?
Say that again?
So AMR,
AMR's guys.
they're not firefighters, I'm getting.
They are not
They're
firefighters at all.
EMTs and or paramedics?
They're
or just-
civilian EMTs and civilian paramedics.
Okay.
They don't have any firefighters.
Yeah, that was my question.
The second position, we already talked about, that's Ms. Cole. She's the EMS administrator. She'll basically be managing all things EMS billing at her office. She's got an email that's ambulancebilling@casagrande.gov. She'll also be receiving such things as the hardship requests. If somebody can't pay their bill and they want to be on a payment plan, she'll assist them with that, along with working with folks at finance to set up those kind of things. We still anticipate hiring a part-time registered nurse to assist with evaluating, basically doing CQI and basically as an educator to assist. We have educators that we bring in from outside the organization, and we also have educators from inside our organization. I think everybody's been through both those things over the years in the various jobs you guys have had. Sometimes it is good to bring in somebody from the outside to help with CQI and education, because if you just get educated by people inside your organization and you're doing something wrong, you just keep educating each other and doing the same thing wrong. So I feel, and I'm a strong advocate for bringing in people from the outside to look at your organization and say, yeah, this is the best practice, or, hey, this is probably a better way to do this, why don't you look at this? And I've been pretty fortunate here. Our command staff, the battalion chiefs, my assistant chief, LaFalce, they're very proactive in looking at outside organizations and folks to come in and help us with this. None of us are professing to have all the answers to this, and we're accepting, we sent Scott Benzing out he went to almost every department in the valley to talk to them about best practices and how they're doing their different stuff to make sure, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, but we did want to make sure we had the best wheel on the wagon. So we had him go out to all these organizations and get best practices from everybody. We feel like over the last 6 to 8 months, and especially since we've gotten the CON, that we really have refined this and got this pretty dialed in.
Chief, just for clarification, it kind of stumped me a little bit when I saw educator, but it's my understanding that is a contract position, it's like a nurse practitioner
It can
or
be a nurse.
doctor?
It can be a nurse practitioner. It can be an RN. We have to see. It's somebody who would be a contract employee. It would be somebody who's part-time, because we're not going to pay the person benefits. And it's a good job for somebody that has extra time to do that, because maybe they already works at a hospital, or that already does the job for a hospital, because a lot of it isn't a lot of work where they're sitting in the office. It is work you can do from home, because they're going to basically be reviewing reports and doing CQI on written reports that our paramedics have done. And we also have our own medical director, Dr. Matthew Earle at the hospital is our medical director. And Dr. Earle and Cindy Reckemeyer, they go through all of our reports as well. They have full access to image trend, and they go through, and all of our battalion chiefs do an audit of 10% of the reports. So we have a number of different mechanisms and triggers in place to trigger CQI. All of our codes are CQI. The battalion chiefs go through them. And with image trend doing our EPCRs now and our billing module, as you go through that, now it actually highlights stuff in red. If something's missing, a required item is missing or not there, or incorrect, they put the birthday in wrong and it's not the correct format, it highlights it in red. And that's one of the jobs that Ms. Cole will be doing, is going through, along with the EMS chief, is going through reports and validating them, because the next day after, like this last weekend would be a difficult one to do it, but tomorrow she would come in and she has to validate the 40 or 50 calls that we went on during the last 24 hours to make sure that the reports are all done correctly and that there's proper narratives. You can't just send in a bill. You have to make sure in the bill has to have all the correct information. It has to have a correct and proper narrative. It has to have a social security number. It has to have birthday. There's a lot of required information that needs to be on there. And she will be going through those to make sure that it's all on there. And then once that's all in there, I guess for lack of a better term, they hit a button and that transmits all the completed reports to Image Trend so they can get it out for billing right away.
Chief, I have a question on the part-time position. Is that, you don't see that as a full-time need? Or is it a money saving?
It probably is a full-time need, but it's very difficult for me to go to him and say, yeah, I need a full-time nurse. At this cost, with these benefits, it costs a lot of money. So initially, what I do is I go part-time and say, here it is. And then when we see the need and how valuable it's been and how that person will help us bring in extra money and keep us from getting sued and make sure we're providing the best care. You know, people, I'm not sure people realize, I mean, what our people are doing out there, they're starting IVs and administering the same kind of drugs you get in the emergency room when you're having chest pain or a stroke, or you've broken your femur so badly that the pain's about to make you pass out. We're giving people morphine to keep them from passing out. And that stuff all has a lot of liability and stuff attached to it. And that's why we have that guy over there, and that's why we have insurance. But our people are really cognizant about wanting to provide the best possible care. They're saving people's lives. I mean, that's what they're doing. And when you're saving somebody's life, you don't want to cause them irreparable injury or further harm by giving them the wrong drug or giving them the wrong amount of a drug or not doing it properly. So having a RN or a CQI process in place, and like I said, we already have a CQI process in place. This is just a way of improving our CQI process and making it more bulletproof, I guess, for lack of a better terms.
So I guess my concern is going from, how many more paramedic positions are you adding?
Well, when you talk about positions with us, remember it's different. So we're adding 4 ambulances,
Right?
which is 4 paramedic positions, but there's 3 shifts. So there's really 12 additional paramedics coming on board.
But I guess where I'm leaning to is, when we look at the expertise of our paramedics as we're getting started, I would say we're probably more in the beginning stages of paramedics who are probably not going to have the experience that the city of Phoenix has, who may have been offering these services for years, not having somebody there for education as a budget savings thing. Is that really the most practical, or is it more practical to have somebody to really mentor these new paramedics and the
No,
service?
I got you. I understand your line of thinking and the thought process, but we're not putting, these aren't brand new paramedics or brand new guys. We send 3 or 4 people to paramedic school every year.
Right.
Those guys come out and work with a more senior paramedic and are supervised before they're just out on their own. The paramedics that we're bringing into the program now, the paramedics that are going to be manning this are paramedics that we're moving off of existing positions and existing rigs. They're people who've been paramedics for a long time. We have very few, we have 3 brand new paramedics that just graduated in December.
So you're confident you have the expertise within the ranks already, and this position's not needed full-time yet, even though I thought I heard you say you'd like it?
Well,
I'm trying to help you, Chief.
I got you. Don't put me on the spot like that. Listen, if you can make that happen, make it happen. I'd love to have it. I'm not going to turn that down. It's something we would use, and it's something that would be valuable, and it's something that would help us. And I feel like the nurse is going to eventually, not not eventually, I think the nurse is gonna end up paying for herself in terms of CQI and in terms of, it's hard to quantify, we didn't get sued because she did this. Well, you can't quantify that, but that's a great thing, because if we're not getting sued, it means we didn't do anything wrong. We don't want to do anything wrong. That's our goal, is to make sure we're doing.
And Chief, we're not necessarily standing up all 4 ambulances at the same time, are we?
We
We're
are
gonna
not,
kind of
sir.
phase.
That's actually the next part of my
Yeah,
presentation.
so we're gonna phase into this, so I would think at some point in time, maybe a full-time position might be warranted.
But I also know the challenges of hiring nurses that aren't working within the medical in a hospital.
Right.
And because they make good money when they're working in the hospital, so.
But you also, that also is the argument of why it's difficult for me to hire a nurse, because they do make good money. And if we hire a nurse, it's gonna be good money, and it's gonna be benefits.
As you said, it may pay for itself, but I don't want to beat this dead horse. Probably not the good metaphor to use in today's.
But to Jeff's point, if you look at the numbers and the matrix of how that person, how much work, then we can validate that a full-time position is necessary versus somebody starting part-time.
So I'll give you just a comparison. So my old department, where I came from, we had, I think, 12 paramedic units, 12 or 13 paramedic units, and we had 3 full-time nurse educators, and then 1 head person, director of education, so a total of 4 nurses for the 12 units, and we're gonna have 4 units. So, yeah, I think, like I said, a full-time person would be great. That's just not usually, typically how things work out when I'm asking for personnel around here. I gotta justify it. I'm not criticizing, that's just the way things are. We're very conservative and make sure that we're doing the right thing when we ask for positions and people. So the low acuity unit, the LA unit, LA 501, is gonna be our first rescue. It'll be Rescue 501. And that will be out of Station 501. Don't pay any attention to the apparatus that you see in there that says 502 on it, because the one that's actually the 501 is our ambulance that we bought in 2018 for a replacement, and the engine blew on it with 40,000 miles on it, which was very disappointing, because diesels are not, that's not supposed to happen to diesel motors. But it's in the shop being repaired. I don't know when it's coming out, pretty soon. Oh, did it? Oh, we got it back today. So maybe when you see the unit that's at 501s, it'll say 501s on it. The 3 paramedics and 3 EMTs that work at Station 501 right now on the LA unit are gonna be the Rescue 501. Those personnel will just snap right over. And I guess, just to clarify, again, this isn't something new that we're doing. Our paramedics start 95% of the IVs on the patients that we respond on now. Our paramedics give medications to all the people that we go on calls on now. Our LA unit has responded on 2,500 calls in all 3 years of existence. It's responded on 2,500 calls. So it's actually very busy. And they transport, a couple 100, 200 people a year because of the issues we were having with the private ambulance company. But same thing, they're starting IVs, and those guys, they're very experienced, the people that work on there. Rescue 502 will be the second one that's gonna go in service. It's gonna be Rescue 502, but because Station 502 cannot accommodate a rescue or the people, it'll be responding from 504s up on McCartney. And we're still working on the 502 issues. A little bit about, one of my slides got deleted, but Rescue 503 and Rescue 504s, those will come into service. And like you said, we're gonna, Mr. Mayor, like you said, we're gonna transition those in. One we're waiting for the apparatus to arrive. They're supposed to be here in February. You guys have already authorized the purchase of it, and they've been being built. But we have not taken delivery on those last two yet. So we are waiting for those. I think they're supposed to be here in February, end of January. Oh, okay, so some mid-month this month, so we'll see about that. The personnel to man those, again, you saw, we hired 7 people the other day. Our next academy will have 8 people in it, possibly 9, depending on what happens with one of the candidates, but there'll be 8 in that academy, and that academy class will graduate in June. And at that point, we'll be able to accommodate the 503 and 504s at that point. This is a little bit about the LA unit that's up there on the slide. So the low acuity unit, I think we all agree that the low acuity unit was very, very popular. I think it was a very positive thing for the city. Unfortunately, with me adding a rescue, the natural transition is that we take those personnel and turn it into a rescue. But again, that's one of the things that we're going to be asking for in our budget request this year, is to replace the low acuity unit. I think the low acuity unit showed its value. I don't think that there's any doubt. I think most of you know this. I think the city manager knows it as well. Taking 2,500 calls off of 501s and 502s and having the LA unit responded on it helped a lot. It also saved us with, when we weren't able to get or we had the day after Christmas, 26th of December, I'm listening, I forget where I was going, but first thing in the morning, 8:30 in the morning, I hear AMR's got an ETA of over an hour. They're sending an ambulance from Phoenix. And the LA unit was able to help us out on those kind of things. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also, again, mention Eloy. Eloy is our saving grace. They help us a lot on calls, and we're gonna have an agreement with them where they're gonna assist us on calls, and we're gonna assist them on calls. And you guys have already approved that, but I just wanna mention that Eloy Fire is tremendous to us. They're a great partner, and they help us a lot.
But Chief, on those, it's not the regular mutual aid agreements, is it, because of being?
It is not. The other mutual aid agreement is specifically related to fires, the mutual aid agreement. This agreement is basically it's called a backup agreement. You guys approved it. We send those to DHS, and they keep them on file. And the only reason it's a little bit different is because it allows for billing. If Eloy responds into the city of Casa Grande, it's not in their CON area, but they are able to bill for it because they have an authorized backup agreement, and vice versa. If we respond into Eloy, we're allowed to bill for it because we have an authorized backup agreement that's been approved by our, basically the leadership or entities from the city.
And Chief, on the backup agreement, so how do you see that with AMR as we move forward?
One, it's a little different. It's not a backup agreement with them.
Okay.
I want to make sure that everybody really understands this, because this should be clear. AMR did not lose their CON. AMR is capable of responding. Any call that we call them to, they're able to respond and take the call. The issue is still, again, is their ETA on calls. Like I said, on the 26th, I heard on the radio that they were sending an ambulance from Phoenix with over an hour ETA. We didn't have any units available. An hour is not acceptable if you or I are sick or one of our loved ones is sick or injured. You don't want to wait an hour for an ambulance. So we're working with them and talking to them about different models. There's different models out there. There's a Tucson model and there's other models. But if AMR has trouble getting ambulances to our calls quickly, we're working on different models where, we can have them come to the BLS calls and our folks will handle the ALS calls and stuff like that. And we're still talking to them and negotiating. And like I said, our negotiations have been very amicable, and I feel like they're moving forward, and I think we're going to have something very shortly to report to you guys. But I feel positive about our talks with AMR.
So you'll come to us with that, chief, when it's done, that
I probably
model,
won't
whatever
come
that
to you, I'll
program?
probably let him know, and he'll probably
He can share
let
it
you
with
know.
us, okay.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Fitzgibbons, it's very likely that we currently have a transport agreement with AMR today.
Expired.
It's expired, but we're operating under it, right? And it's been a bit reversed, where we have allowed our personnel to essentially step onto their units in order to make transports. This is going to be a bit reversed from what we've done in the past, but they will agree to terms that the mayor and council will have to approve with AMR to serve in the capacity that the chief is describing. So it'll be agreement that will come before the mayor and council.
Thank you.
Hey, Chief, explain to me a little bit, because I know when we talked about this back in 2018, we talked about the low acuity unit handling some of the basic medical calls, right? So over 90% of the calls are medical in nature of some sort.
About 70%.
70, all right, well, I thought it was higher than that. But a lot of them are medical in relation. So one of the things that we had talked about was the ability for an ambulance service or a low acuity unit to be able to handle those calls without sending, a whole unit, another big truck, a big fire truck to that call when it's just a medical call. So are we still looking at that? Are we still looking to try and,
That's the model that we've been using for the last 2.5, 3 years.
okay.
And like I said, they've responded on about 2,500 calls a year that way.
But can't one of these rescue units be used like that too, or does it?
Well, they can. The problem with us using a rescue
Because I hear
unit like
the
that
low
is-
acuity unit's gonna have to be the same thing that we had when now we were adding more ambulances, right? We're adding more
Correct.
rescue units.
The problem with using a rescue unit like that is the rescue unit responds on a guy that has twisted his ankle and might have broke his ankle. Now you got an ALS rescue unit sitting there with a guy with maybe a fractured ankle, and he calls because somebody's having a stroke at the high school. Now I've got a rescue unit sitting there with a BLS patient when I need an ALS unit responding to somewhere else for an ALS patient. That's why we.
Yeah, but if you have enough rescue units, you should be able to respond to that call at the school.
What's enough? I mean, we have 4, and there are many, many times in this city where all of our fire engines and every unit we have is out on a call frequently, which is why Eloy has to come over here 150 or 200 times a year, because that many times a year, every fire unit in the city is on a call.
So what are we gonna do when we get a BLS call now, if we don't have a low acuity unit?
Well, right now, what we're doing is looking at using AMR for that, and also, we still use fire engines for that without lights and sirens. Which is a model that's typically done all over the United States.
But a rescue unit and a low acuity unit is the same apparatus with different equipment on, is that?
Well,
Because we're changing a low acuity unit to
I could put a
rescue.
low acuity unit in your pickup truck if I wanted to.
Okay,
I could put a low acuity unit in a Prius if I wanted to.
but we use a typical, what most people would call an ambulance,
Right now we
Right.
are, and the reason we did that was by design.
because we knew we were gonna go to this.
Well, 1, because of that, and 2, because we were having trouble with AMR. And that was the only way we could legally transport somebody with our ambulance, was if we had an extended ETA from them. We can put a low acuity unit, like I said, in anything we want, because the low acuity, you can respond.
You're not
And
transporting somebody.
they're not gonna transport, they're just gonna call for a BLS, an ambulance. to
So
come
we could have
in.
a lot less expensive apparatus to handle the low acuity.
Yeah, and we've talked about that. We have brush rigs and other fire engine other fire apparatus that 2 people can ride in
Like
very
a
easily.
SUV or a pickup with a camper shell, like the battalion chief type truck, right? Could be.
Well, Well, and I think, like you said, I mean, we've seen the success of this over the
Yeah,
years.
I mean, I hate to lose
and
it.
I would hate to lose
As
it
a community
too.
service as well.
And so I think, like you said, there's some discrepancies in funding, so, maybe in the next funding cycle, I really hope we do take a look at it, because you would hate to take that piece out, of the, the department there, because it has been so successful. So I really hope that we can take a look at it and see.
But I'd like to look at
I
the
agree
data.
with you guys
Yeah,
wholeheartedly.
the
I'd like to look at the
Obviously, the
data too,
data
and look at the calls that we have and the
ALS, BLS.
ALS,
Yeah.
BLS type calls, and then make sure that we're using our equipment and our people most efficiently, because we are responsible for the citizens' dollars that are being spent here, and we're gonna spend a lot of money on this service.
And I agree with you, and fortunately, I think that is what you pay me for, to make sure that we're doing that.
Okay.
And I assure you
And
that
just
we are.
asking, just asking.
I assure you that we are, but, keep in mind, the low acuity unit, what they respond in is not the expensive thing. It's the two people that are in it.
Right.
That are the expensive thing.
Right.
It's the manpower.
Right.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, if I can just build on that, I think it's one of the reasons that Chief Keen elected to add it to the discussion point this evening, is that because of the change in terminology from low acuity to rescue, there really isn't going to be, we're going to staff it very similarly to what we have been staffing the low acuity unit today, but converting that to serve as an ambulance that can actually transport people. It does that today, so I know that the definitions get a little bit clouded, if you will. But essentially, that's the point that I believe he's making, and the discussions that he and I have had, is that once that conversion takes place, that doesn't necessarily mean that a low acuity unit, that we have budget authority for a low acuity unit at this point. But it is one of the reasons why he anticipates bringing something back in an upcoming fiscal year to evaluate that and likely have more understanding of the financial obligations of that at that time. But what I'm hearing is there's going to be an expectation of some data that goes with that, and certainly we will make sure that we show that. I think from my perspective, one of the elements that have been positive on the low acuity unit, and I know that Councilman Herman and the mayor have really talked about this in past years since we stood it up, is that it is going to relieve the number of calls that are transpiring out of Station 501 and 502. By us sending that particular piece of apparatus and the personnel, it has reduced the number of calls that those two particular stations are running, which has been a benefit. I think the chief would agree with that. I believe that the crews would agree with that it's reducing the number of obligations that we're rolling the big piece, the big apparatus, the big fire truck on. Is that fair, chief?
Absolutely. I need the fire engine to be available when a fire happens.
Right.
I was gonna say, then we have the 4 people available on a fire engine to go
Correct.
respond to a
And
fire.
I can't tell you what the low acuity is gonna look like in the future. We've talked about this as well. It probably will be 2 EMTs rather than a medic and an EMT. I'll use the medic for a rescue, and we'll put 2 EMTs on a low acuity. And that's truly how a low acuity is supposed to work. It's supposed to be for low acuity calls to relieve that. Listen, I would love to have 2 more. I'd love to have a low acuity unit to put up on the north end of town, but I haven't had that luxury. I think the LA unit would be even busier than the 24 or 2500 calls if I didn't keep them just in 501 and 502's area. They only handle calls on the south side of the city. So,
Thanks, Chief.
in terms of the deployment, the unit that's at 501s is in service and transporting people to the hospital right now. We are transporting, we're kind of doing, basically, we kind of talked about it, we're doing kind of a soft opening. Scott Benzing is following them around during the day and sometimes in the evening, going on calls with them, kind of troubleshoot, make sure there's no issues, answer any questions, watch the restocking of drugs and IVs and bandages and all that stuff issue to make sure that our battalion chiefs have a good handle on it. Our battalion chiefs do a great job supervising, but we're adding an additional thing for them to supervise. And they already manage a lot of programs and a lot of other stuff, so that's the reason we're adding an EMS chief, so he's been able to go out and do that. So that unit has been in service. The additional unit will be placed in service probably in the next week or so. I'm still trying to juggle some beds and get some accommodations. You guys will see something on the council agenda. It's probably on the consent agenda for the next meeting, I think. But we're gonna be, the fire department's gonna be using the old Aerovac building at the airport to house the 503 unit crew until 503s is officially opened. So that worked out well. What else? One of the last ambulance that we received actually got inspected by DHS today and was approved, so that's done. Again, I don't want to keep harping on this stuff because you guys have heard this over and over again. Life Pack 15s, we used to order and get them 6 months later. Now they're 36 weeks to get them. So everything we're ordering, if it's got electronic parts in it, it's taken a long time to get them. 2 of our ambulances have been inspected, that's now 3. We're working with, Scott Benzing and the battalion chiefs are working very closely. There was a couple of challenges at the beginning to make sure we had enough supplies at all the stations. We had to get all the different Valley Hospital phone numbers. Imagine every time you walk up to an emergency room, you gotta punch in an access code. Well, we don't know the access code for all the hospitals in the Valley, so we've been kind of making sure we get all that into all the phones and in all the apparatus. We had to order fuel cards for all the apparatus. And then lastly, we're working on some considerations for maintenance. I can't have, if a unit gets a flat tire at 10:15 at night, I don't have the ability to park that thing and have fleet fix it the next morning at 6 o'clock when they come in. I gotta get the tire fixed right then and back into the station to handle calls. So we're working closely with fleet on what we're gonna do about that and coming up with some alternatives on that. But 24-hour maintenance is a consideration that we're having to look at. We already talked about this a little bit. We're talking about moving over at the Aerovac building. 2 ambulances are coming in. You guys have all this information so you can look at the calls. Mr. Mayor, there's 64% of the calls are EMS calls, about 70%. I think there's a breakdown on ALS too. Response times, there's some stuff about 1710 response times in there you guys can look at, but it talks about response times and how they're calculated and figured.
It's more
I will tell you what we did with the budget. So in 2022, we didn't know what was going on with the CON, so we did a notional budget. It's called a 512 is the line we used for EMS. We did a notional budget, and we kind of, as an exercise, we moved all the stuff that was in fire operations that we thought was EMS related or should be EMS related into the 512 budget. We didn't take it very seriously because we knew the CON hearing hadn't happened. This year, we took it a lot more seriously. We moved all the expenses that we thought could be allocated to EMS and moved them into the 512 budget and did a very extensive budget, 512 budget, and you guys adopted this budget. You'll see there's been no expenditures out of it yet because technically we aren't expending any money out of it yet. We'll turn that on probably in the next few days. Mr. Raines probably has.
Yes, thanks, Chief. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the chief is absolutely right. This uncertain about when the CON was going to be granted and when the city would actually begin to provide the service. We really were searching for budget authority from the mayor and council should we find the need to begin to implement. And the good news is that ultimately we had requested and council approved an allocation, as you can see on this particular page. I can tell you that there's some work that needs to be done on this budget. I think the chief agrees. As we continue the incremental stand-up, as the chief has pointed out tonight, then this will number one, be able to have a better sense of what we need to request for fiscal year 25. And I know I had a couple of calls specifically about the commencement of the new ambulances that are scheduled to arrive sometime this month, maybe early next month, transpiring on June or July of 2024. but yet in the narrative, it said fiscal year '25. We were going by fiscal year there, but essentially this budget will be refined, and ultimately, I anticipate that we'll begin our billing here very, very shortly, and we'll have more information, more data on the financial element of revenue streams for providing these services versus the costs associated with providing ambulance transports. And so we anticipate giving the mayor and council updates along the way. I would anticipate that we will be able to dial these numbers in a little bit more by the time we get to our budget retreat in April. And then again, in a year from now, I think we'll have a much better understanding of the expenses as well as the revenue stream that we're seeing. And the key element of that is the collection rate that we're recognizing as part of our revenue stream.
I think this last slide pretty much illustrates a lot of what we talked about. The cost of all of our stuff is always our personnel. That's our highest cost, costs the most. The LA unit's great and all, but the cost is those two guys on it. Are there any other questions I can answer for you guys?
I think you answered all of mine.
We asked them as we went along.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, we'll stand adjourned. Let's start at 7:10.